Chapter 178 Lost Expedition. Soon, another map was spread on the table. This one was drawn on a piece of crude parchment made out of monster hide, and much less detailed than the one hanging on the wall. Well, that was understandable. Because the second map did not depict the Dark City, but the Forgotten Shore itself. Sonny stared at it in stunned silence. Yeah. Nephi had not wasted any time during these 3 months. He had no idea how she had gathered all this information, but there was a lot more on the map than he could have ever imagined. At the center of it, a straight black light depicted the Crimson Spire. The labyrinth flowed from it, devouring the parchment like an ocean of blood. To the east, a small circle of black ink with a symbol of a white tower inside of it marked the Dark City. The city was perched on the edge of another, much larger circle. It didn't take too much effort to recognize the Cyclopean crater. After all, Sonny had traversed it on a rickety boat once, a lifetime ago. However, only now, looking at it in scale, did he finally realize just how giant the crater was, and how vast the Forgotten Shore itself appeared. Back on Earth, it would have been as large as a continent. The Dream Realm was indeed much bigger than their own planet, considering that just one of its numerous regions was this enormous. There were other symbols on the map that he didn't recognize. However, several of them attracted his attention especially. On the other side of the crater, almost exactly opposite the Dark City, a symbol of a tree depicted the Ashen Barrow. Some distance to the east of it, on a straight line, there was a mark in the shape of a red cross. Another red cross was drawn inside the crater just outside the eastern side of the Dark City. The third one was about a week's worth of traveling time to the north, near a symbol that looked like a grotesque, misshapen skull. The fourth one was halfway between the ruins and the Crimson Spire. The fifth one lay to the south, about the same distance as the third, drawn atop the symbol of an arching bridge. The last red cross was at the very edge of the parchment, far away to the south, beyond the labyrinth. Near it, 2 symbols were drawn, one was a crown, and the other one was a question mark. Sonny quickly realized what these crosses represented. They were the giant statues of the 7 forgotten heroes who had given the terrible oath to vanquish the darkness, and created the Starlight Legion. The one to the east of the Soul Devourer was the statue of the knight that he had used as a shelter on his first night in the Dream Realm. The one near the walls of the city belonged to the woman whose hand had saved them from drowning in the dark sea on the night of their escape. The other 4 crosses, most likely, marked 4 more headless statues. But where was the 7th? Frowning, Sonny glanced at the map and said, "So let me get this straight. You want to leave the Dark City, cross the labyrinth, reach the edges of the Forgotten Shore, and then return?" Nephi smiled. "Pretty much, yes," he sighed. "If we somehow survive the months of traveling through the labyrinth and actually manage to escape it, why the hell would we return?" The smile on her face withered. Changing Star lingered for a few moments, then pointed to the 3 symbols at the lower edge of the map, the red cross, the question mark, and the crown. "The First Lord of the castle led an expedition to find the way out of the Forgotten Shore. This is where their trace disappeared. From what we were able to learn, an unassailable mountain chain blocks the path to the south. They ventured into the mountains, and never returned. Nothing but death awaits us there." Sonny scratched the back of his head. "So you aren't really looking for a way out, you're looking for the remains of the cohort of sleepers that had conquered the castle 15 years ago?" Neff nodded. "There is an item that they took away from the castle. If we find it, we'll have a chance in the fight against Gunlog." Sonny frowned. He felt as though she was not telling him everything. Maybe what little trust remained between them was not enough to share those secrets. Maybe she didn't want someone else in the room to hear them. But then again, he didn't really care. Changing Star's business was her own. Sonny was just here as a potential mercenary. As long as the reward was worth it, he was ready to not ask any questions. Provided that not knowing the answers was not going to get him killed, of course. Feeling his hesitation, Nephi added, "The way to the mountains is not as dangerous as you think. There is a method we can use to reach them comparatively safely. But once we're there, that's where we'll need your talents. Having you with us will make a lot of things easier." Sunny looked at her with doubt. "How do you know all this? It's not like there's anyone in the Dark City who was alive back then." Nephi shrugged. "There isn't, but there are stories. Some written evidence. However, most of this we have learned from Cassie's visions." She gave the blind girl a warm look. "Cassie has helped us a lot." Sunny had to think. If Changing Star made this plan, it meant that she had good reasons to believe that it was doable. Of course, there would be danger. Nothing on the Forgotten Shore was ever safe or easy. But there was a rare opportunity in all of this, too. He felt very tempted to leave the ruins for a few months in the company of an extremely formidable cohort. Outside the walls of the Dark City, nightmare creatures were generally of a lower rank than those inside. The efficiency of his hunting would be much higher, which would land him more shadow fragments and memories to feed to the Stone Saint. Especially if powerhouses like Nephi, Effie, and Castor were fighting alongside him. But more importantly, if Cassie was there to warn them of the dangers that they had no business trying to fight. He never forgot how many times her affinity to mysteries and revelations had saved their lives in the past. Like on that awful night when they had summoned a terrifying mimic from the depths of the Dark Sea. With a true seer accompanying them, the most harrowing thing about the labyrinth, the cursed black waters, were not as unknowable and thus deadly anymore. So he was not immediately against the idea, more so because he would be additionally compensated for the efforts. But there was something else that he had to consider. Looking up, Sunny glanced at the people gathered in the room and cleared his throat. I would like to talk to Nephi alone. Please." Most of them just stared at him without moving. Castor, especially, did not seem happy about the prospect. What is it about him and Neph? Why is he so possessive? But after Changing Star gave them a look, they reluctantly stood up and left the room one after another. Soon, Sunny and Nephi were left alone. He hesitated for a long time before finally speaking. His voice was raw and hoarse. "Neph, why are you doing this? Why are you trying to pull me back? Don't you know how this all will end?" She watched him silently for a while with an inexorable expression. Then she simply said, "Because there's only two people I trust in this world, Sunny. One is Cassie. The other one is you. I only trust you to have my back." He couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Have your back? Neph, you know what awaits the two of us in the future. This story won't have a happy ending. There'll be only sorrow, pain, and rage. Remember?" Changing Star lingered for a few moments. Her face was calm and firm. When the silence became almost overwhelming, she finally answered. "Life is not a story, Sunny. It only ends when you die." He smiled crookedly, not knowing how to answer. "So? Will you help me?" Sunny sighed and stood up, glancing at the map of the Forgotten Shore one last time. "I don't know. I need some time to think. I'll take Effie and keep her safe for a week. You'll have the answer once we meet again." She nodded, accepting that condition. Turning around, Sunny forced himself to appear nonchalant and left. As soon as the door closed behind him, his expression changed. "Damn. I forgot to discuss my compensation. It would look really silly if he went back now, right?" "Right." The shadow palmed its face, once again lamenting the stupidity of its master. Chapter 179 New Generation. Once outside, Sunny spent some time finding Effie and Kai. The two of them were in the dining area of the lodge, discussing something between themselves. There was no sign of Cassie anywhere, but he did notice Castor observing him from the stairs leading to the second floor. "Is she avoiding me?" Somewhat disappointed, Sunny landed on a chair next to the two locals he had come to know and gave them a dark look. What, the two of you know each other? Kai smiled. Who doesn't know Huntress Athena? We had a few brushes in the past. Deciding not to inquire what type of brushes he was talking about, Sunny sighed and asked, Does she know about that peculiar flaw of yours? The charming young man blinked a couple of times, then said with confusion, I guess so. I don't make a secret out of it. Great. Of all the people in the world, he got stuck with two weirdos who had no qualms about telling every random stranger about their most hidden vulnerability. Well, if he had a flaw like Kai's, he wouldn't worry about it too much either. Lucky bastard. Since there was no point in pretending any more, Sunny simply asked, Well? Was anyone in that room lying? Effie grinned. So that's why you dragged Knight along. Paranoid much? Sunny would love nothing more than to ignore that question, but unfortunately, his own flaw was much more restrictive than Kai's. Not at all. In fact, I think that I'm exactly as paranoid as a person should be. By which I mean extremely, of course. Saying that, he looked at the charming Archer with expectation. Kai hesitated for a few moments. No one said a single lie. Your friends are all extremely honest people, Sunny. Oh, you poor lamb. Not knowing how to react to that display of naivete, Sunny shook his head and lowered his voice. Not even Castor? Kai gave him a nod. No, he was honest, too. Was Sunny wrong? Was Castor really just an honest and honorable guy? Was his distrust irrational? Somewhat unsure, Sunny lingered for a bit, and then turned to Effie. Neff and I agreed to continue our conversation in a week. Until then, you'll be under my protection. The Huntress giggled. Wow. That makes me feel real safe. Thanks, Shorty. He grimaced. Don't you worry. I might not look like much, but wait till you see my roommate. Kai suddenly choked on his drink and paled a little. Reminded of something, Sunny patted him on the back and said, Anyway, thanks for your help. Our deal is done. See you around, I guess. He was not going to miss this guy one bit. Sunny wasn't winning any prizes with his looks already, but next to Kai, he seemed downright barely above average. The charming Archer looked at him for a few moments, then forced out a smile. Yeah, it was nice to make your acquaintance, Sunny. I can honestly say that spending time with you is, an unforgettable experience. With that, he glanced at Effie with something that resembled pity, rose, and left. The two of them were left alone. The Huntress looked around with a weary expression, and then asked in a neutral tone. So? When do we leave? Sunny didn't hesitate. Right now. Honestly, I can wait to get back to the ruins. This place, it gives me the creeps. Effie gave him a strange look, then shrugged. Sure, no problem. Let's ditch this scary place and go hide in the ancient cursed ruins. At least we can feel safe there, right? Some time later, they were carefully walking through the streets of the dark city. Being here in daylight was not something Sunny was accustomed to, so he was justifiably tense. Luckily, both of them were experienced hunters and worked well together. Sunny fell into the familiar rhythm of cooperating with Effie without skipping a bit, as though 3 whole months had not passed since they last saw each other. It was honestly nothing short of jolly. At some point, the unruly Huntress glanced at him and asked, But seriously, how did you survive, Sunny? He gave her a dark look, then shrugged. How do you think? You know that I am very good at hiding in the shadows. I slept during the day and hunted during the night. Observed my prey carefully before striking at their weak spots. If I ever met something I wasn't sure I could kill, I ran. She became thoughtful for a while, then said, It's noticeable, you know. You've changed. You feel like a true hunter now. Sunny grinned. Well, I would hope so. I hunted more nightmare creatures than was reasonable, really. She smirked. How many? That was a good question. Sunny hesitated before answering. Around 60? Yeah, no more than that, I think. Together with those terrors he had slain in the labyrinth, his kill count had long ago moved past 100. Effie blinked and looked at him with a dark expression. That many hunts in only 3 months. The number was nothing short of staggering. Actually, it was completely insane. Out in the real world, it was widely known that awakened nightmare creatures were too tough for mere sleepers to fight. Anyone who managed to prevail in a battle against one would earn themselves a proper reputation. Killing a dozen would make a person famous. If Sonny were to return home and claim that he had slaughtered 100, most of them in a cursed ruin populated by fallen abominations, the news of his accomplishment would fly around the whole planet in an instant. He would be hailed as an unparalleled genius and a hope of the entire generation. And yet, there were dozens of people just like him in the Dark City, many of them even more accomplished. Much more. Effie had several hundred hunts under her belt. There were a couple more hunters in the outer settlement whose track record was just as impressive, even if with the death of Jubii, their numbers had shrunk. Inside the bright castle, there was Gunlog himself, his 5 lieutenants, all the pathfinders of the host, more than a few experienced hunters, and even a handful of guards with a lot of battle scars to prove their prowess. All of them were at a level that sleepers simply weren't supposed to ever achieve. The Forgotten Shore was truly an interesting place. If Nephites were to somehow succeed and bring even just several of them back to the real world, how would the world change? Would other things that had been considered impossible before suddenly have their status put under scrutiny? Was it the reason why the spell gave her the name Changing Star? Was Neph destined to not only create change, but also be the catalyst of it? Consumed with these thoughts, Sonny walked through the cursed ruins. Soon, a familiar shape of the cathedral appeared before his eyes. Looking at it, Sonny shuddered. He had been honest when he told Effie about how he managed to survive all this time. However, he had failed to mention how close he came to dying in the process. The memory of his first visit to the cathedral, and its consequences, was something he really liked to avoid. Chapter 180 Breakpoint. It happened a few weeks after he left the castle behind. Back then, Sonny was just starting to feel confident in the absolute darkness of the cursed night. He stalked the ruins, searching for prey and slaying one monster after another. Looking back, those few victories might have gone to his head a little. Or maybe he was just too sane to survive alone in the Dark City. It was the first meeting with the Black Knight that caused him to lose that state of mind. Sonny did not become interested in the ruined cathedral by accident, nor was he led there by empty curiosity. In fact, he had noticed something strange about the ancient temple and decided to explore it after careful consideration. Because the thing he saw was too alluring to ignore. At dawn, for a few short minutes, he could see a weak, ethereal golden glow emanating from the dark cathedral. The same golden glow he had seen twice before. Once deep within the ruby droplets of his own blood after consuming the drop of ichor, and another time exuding from Changing Star's unconscious body after her battle with the horror of the depths. Without having to guess, Sonny knew what this golden shine was. It was the light of divinity. With his own eyes altered by the drop of divine blood, which was left on the talons of the vile thieving bird after it had stolen Weaver's eye, Sonny was somehow able to perceive it. Considering that both Nephites and he possessed some measure of divine affinity, it wasn't hard to come to this conclusion. More than that, the circumstances surrounding the awakening of his ability to see the golden glow supported it. Thus, hoping to find another treasure equal to the drop of ichor, Sonny entered the ruined cathedral. Then he froze for a second, awed by its grandeur. That second was all it took for the Black Knight to skewer him on his sword. Sonny didn't know how the massive devil managed to avoid being seen by his shadow, nor how he got so close without making any noise. All he knew was that a menacing black giant suddenly stepped forward from the darkness that enveloped the temple and pierced him with a wrathful gaze. There were 2 scarlet flames burning in the impenetrable emptiness behind the visor of the knight's helmet. Looking at them, Sunny felt as though he was staring into the eyes of death itself. However, even though Sunny was caught by surprise, his body moved on its own. Countless hours of practice did not go to waste. In the end, it were the reflexes that Sunny had engraved into his muscles and bones that saved his life, even if only by a hair's breadth. Because of his quick reaction, the massive great sword of the evil creature did not cut him in two. Instead, it simply disemboweled him. Feeling a blinding pain pierce his abdomen, Sunny staggered and looked down, only to see a river of blood flowing from his stomach, which was cut wide open. The red ropes of his intestines were clearly visible in the terrible wound, already on their way to falling out. The horror of seeing something that should have been inside of him moving to the outside was much more powerful than the excruciating pain of his flesh being torn apart. Pressing one hand against the wound, Sunny fell on his back and weakly tried to crawl away. However, the Black Knight was already moving, raising his great sword to deliver a finishing blow. For a fraction of a second, everything froze. Sunny didn't have time to come up with an elaborate plan, nor even think things through. All he knew was that he had to buy himself a chance to crawl away, somehow. Of all the memories at his disposal, nothing seemed to be of use. Not the austere and razor-sharp midnight shard, not the ominous and powerful puppeteer's shroud. His mighty Tier 5 armor did not even slow the black blade for a moment. Even augmented by the shadow, they were not a match for the terrifying devil of the ruined cathedral. In the end, Sunny simply thrust his hand forward and let a small and ordinary-looking rock fly from it into the depths of the ancient temple. His shadow wrapped itself around the little stone, enhancing its enchantments. In the next moment, the rock suddenly howled, replicating the scream of the last nightmare creature that Sunny had killed. Augmented by the shadow, the howl shook the walls of the cathedral, causing dust to fly into the air. The Black Knight stopped, then looked over his shoulder in the direction where the howl was coming from. He seemed to hesitate for a moment. Not wasting any time, Sunny pressed tight onto his terrible wound, rose to his feet and staggered away, almost slipping in the puddle of his own blood. Groaning from pain, he tried to reach the exit of the old temple. Miraculously, he did. The Black Knight stopped in the doorway, simply following the small figure of the mortally wounded human with the burning flames that served him as eyes. Then, it indifferently turned away and slowly returned into the darkness. Some time later, Sunny found himself lying in a ditch somewhere in the depths of the dark city. He had found his way to this ditch and crawled into it, hoping to hide himself from the monsters stalking the ruins at night. He was consumed by pain, fear, and disbelief. Was this how it was all going to end? Was this how he was going to die? He wanted to cry for help, but knew that no one would come. He wanted to simply cry, but for some reason, nothing but laughter escaped from his lips. Funny, it was just too damn funny. An outskirt rat like him, dying in a ditch. What a fitting end. Why wouldn't he laugh? It was all just so hilarious. A laughing fit sent him into an ocean of suffering. Every time he moved, it felt as though invisible blades were cutting into his abdomen, slicing his flesh apart. And yet, he couldn't stop laughing. The funniest thing of all was that he couldn't even die. No matter how much he bled, his tenacious blood refused to give up. Guided by Bloodweave, it desperately tried to repair the damage done to his body. However, the damage was just too extensive. Even augmented by the shadow, the Bloodweave couldn't contend with it. In the end, he was locked in an endless cycle of excruciating agony, not quite alive, but also unable to die yet. Minute after minute, hour after hour, nothing but pain and suffering drowned his consciousness, until something inside simply cracked. Who wouldn't have gone mad? Through the fog that clouded his mind, Sunny hazily realized that the sun had come up, then disappeared again. This happened a few times until he finally let out a quiet sigh. Enough was enough. He couldn't take it anymore. It was time to give up. He had a good run, really. But how could anyone endure all this? He wanted to die. He was ready. Are you? Are you really ready? Sonny thought for a bit, and then suddenly bared his teeth. Fuck no. He was not ready. Give up? Never. Never. He was never going to give up. He refused to give the world the satisfaction of devouring him. Not unless it choked to death on his soul. No, I'm not going to die. I'm going to live. I'm going to thrive. I'll be the last one standing, no matter what. With that thought, he summoned the Midnight Shard and gripped its hilt with the last bit of strength left in his body. Memory enchantments, unbroken. Enchantment description: this blade refuses to be broken, and thus is durable beyond reason. It will greatly enhance the power of its wielder when they are close to death, however only if the wielder is still unwilling to surrender. Responding to his vicious promise, the ancient blade finally opened the gate to the well of power hiding somewhere deep within his soul. Instantly, a torrent of energy filled his body with dark resolve. The power given to Sonny by the Midnight Shard enhanced the healing factor of Bloodweave, allowing it to just barely keep him from slipping over the edge of death while it slowly began to repair his ravaged body. And as long as he was almost dead, the effect of Unbroken continued to feed Bloodweave with power, creating another cycle. A virtuous cycle. A cycle of unbroken will to survive. This was how Sonny was able to live through his first encounter with the Black Knight. However, while his body eventually healed, the wound dealt to his mind remained. Days later, after Sonny finally crawled from that ditch, he was never quite the same. And he never forgot the debt he owed to the Black Knight. One day, he was going to kill the bastard, no matter the cost. And now, approaching the cathedral months later in the company of Effie, Sonny felt like that day was drawing closer. Perhaps he really should agree to participate in Neff's expedition, as long as she helps him repay that debt. There was a lot to think about. Effie's voice tore him away from these thoughts. Huh? Sonny? Are you all right? He shook off the harrowing memories, hesitated for a bit, and then smiled. Of course. Never been better. Here we are, by the way. Welcome to my humble palace. The huntress looked at the grandiose cathedral with doubt. Here? You live here? Sonny remembered his first nightmare and shrugged. What can I say? I have a weak spot for ancient temples.